Thank you. Yes, everybody, I'm sorry I couldn't be there due to travel restrictions. I had to rearrange everything to do this talk instead of in person by Zoom, but I know that's something we've all grown accustomed to over the last 2 years, so I hope it's not too bad. But I do believe I got an interesting topic to share with you. But before I do, let me just say, like most of us, mental health issues have come close to touching some of my family members, and I've experienced, the trauma of that. We're now up to over 10% of all deaths in North America, and I believe Europe as well, coming from suicide. It wasn't always that high, and it's rising, as well as other mental health issues are on the rise. And so for me, the whole mental health crisis globally is getting scarier every year. So I think it's an emergency, and we need to treat it as an emergency. And talk therapy and standard pharmaceuticals definitely help, but clearly they do not help enough to stave off this increasing rate of suffering that's happening. So something needs to change. And of course, most of us are at this conference because we believe that we are at the inception of a disruptive sea change in the evolution of the global mental health crisis. And that sea change is psychedelic mental health treatment. So I'm going to be discussing details about my company's participation in this revolution, but consider it just a case study where you can replace our company's name with any household name brand who could do the same type of plan, especially if they're a household name in the space of health and wellness. My talk is more about how brands will play into this industry as it unfolds. So, Irwin Naturals is a company I started 28 years ago. It's a nutraceuticals company, and we're an anomalous company in the US because we've been profitable every year nonstop for 28 years, and we've been growing every year. We're in about 100,000 outlets in the US, over about 1.4 million shelf positions, and we have approximately 80% of US households are familiar with our brand, and the rank is about 4.6 out of a 5-star system in terms of how much customers appreciate or trust our brand relative to other brands. Okay, so as we all know, in recent years, there has been a torrent of high-level peer-reviewed studies that have conclusively proven psychedelics achieve success rates that flat out eclipse the old school standard therapies. Unfortunately, until plant-based molecules are approved by ministries of health around the world, such as the FDA, the legal psychedelic ketamine is the only one that can be used in most countries, because most countries allow off-label therapy as long as a medical doctor decides that an FDA-approved drug can be used for a treatment other than what the FDA approved it for. That is perfectly legal. So it's ketamine, which is the biggest opportunity to move in now if we view this as an emergency, because it'll be some years before most of the mental health conditions are covered by a new future slate of say psilocybin and other type of molecules. But even though legally ketamine is the only solution to begin working with psychedelic treatments immediately, the problem is that insurance companies are not obligated to pay for this off-label use by doctors of an FDA-approved drug like ketamine. And PTSD and various other mental disorders map to personal income. So the lower income sectors of our population are the people who need the treatment the most. And yet they are the most hurt by the lack of insurance coverage for this life-saving off-label treatment. Now, this is a Hurricane Katrina level emergency. So something has to change and change fast, especially for the low income portions of our population. Now, insurance companies such as Anthem are focused on profit. Now, that's not a problem. We just have to show them the money. So our company intends to produce data from our clinic chain as time goes on and present this financial data to the big payers like Aetna and the Veterans Administration in order to prove that off-label ketamine treatment will save them a significant amount of money compared to the less effective therapies that they are currently paying for. They've already become aware, of course, about the outrageously superior statistical results in terms of the percentage of people, for example, in treatment-resistant depression. So they're well aware of that, but what we want to do is begin showing them data to demonstrate and get into discussions at a high level about how covering off-label ketamine use now will be far more profitable for them than continuing with the much less effective old school or generation 1 therapies. But it's difficult for a small team of, say, 5 ketamine clinics and the owners of that type of operation to get high-level meetings with major payers, high-level C-suite executive meetings with people at Anthem or the Veterans Administration. So obviously a large public company like Irwin Naturals or any one of hundreds of others that have a national footprint of clinics would be able to more easily engage at these high levels with major payers. So how do we use the asset of a trusted household name in nutraceutical science to make a mass market impact in the global mental health crisis? That's a little bit about the case study that we'll go into now. So to think about this, I'd like to focus us on the importance of brand. So whether it be a service or a physical product, like an iPhone, people buy brands, not things or services. We buy brands. Sometimes the brand is a person, sometimes the brand is a name, but we buy brands. So a supply chain, like the mental health service industry that's going to deal with the mental health crisis going forward, has 4 classes of companies that exist in a hierarchical stack. 2 of them are brand companies, and 2 of them are not. 2 of these categories are not. 2 of the categories are. The first category in the hierarchical stack are the producers of raw materials. So there are no brands in this category. So they're always subject to the brand owners picking them as the companies that get to participate in the supply chain. So again, it doesn't matter whether it's an iPhone or a pharmaceutical. There are the people at the very bottom who create the materials that eventually get assembled and then branded. All right, so the second type of company in the stack are the factories that are contracted by the brand owners to assemble materials into a finished product, whether it's a drug like Wellbutrin, or whether it's a physical product or an electronic product. So those guys, of course, also are like commodity companies. They're exchangeable. You know, if you own Nike, you can have any factory, or if you're Coca-Cola, you can have any factory assemble the materials to create your finished product. You really don't care which one, other than caring about getting a good price and making sure that the quality and the delivery is reliable. But there are many players who can do that for you. And so you'll have Nike or you'll have Coke often switch from one contract manufacturer to another, just as the contract manufacturers will switch from one raw material supplier to the other. And the third category in the hierarchy are the brand owning companies that end up selling trademarked drugs, such as Wellbutrin, to the people who distribute. And then at the end of the supply chain are the brands that distribute to the patients, such as Kaiser Permanente, right? Or if it's in the broader retail landscape, it could be Walmart or Amazon. So in the first two categories of the supply chain, they're commodity. The companies do not have a secure footing because they can be traded out by the brand owning companies, and they don't have high valuations as a multiple of earnings because they don't have brand equity. So all you can really count is look at their CapEx investment for what that's worth, their cash, you know, their profits that they're likely to keep making. But in terms of real long-term brand equity and real ability to steer and control and influence the emerging industry, they really have very little influence. Okay, so in the world of banking, he who has the gold makes the rules. But in the world of branding, regardless of the industry, she who owns the top brand makes the rules and determines who gets to participate in the supply chain itself. Accordingly, companies with top brands have valuations that are much higher multiples of earnings. So every few decades, there is a sea change that occurs in a mega industry. And those people, those companies who are able to recognize the coming sea change and then mobilize to move very quickly can nest themselves into a Coca-Cola first mover position so that the second and third place competitors have a high barrier to overcome if they intend to replace the brand leader. So Irwin Naturals, in this case study, will be the first mover at scale. We have this head start that I described, and that is this trusted household name brand that is known by about 80% of North American households and also a good number of people in other countries. We are going through the very beginning stages at our company of a rapid roll-up of ketamine as well as behavioral health clinics, where in the behavioral health clinics we will introduce ketamine treatment. The largest ketamine clinic chain in the world has only about 10 locations or so. Of course, that is not a household name brand. Now, to put this into perspective, there are 189,000 dental clinics in the United States. And not all people go to the dentist once a year. Now, compare that to what is about to happen in the psychedelic mental health revolution. About 1 in 4 adults suffer from diagnosable mental disorders. Now, ketamine treatment can help with a large percentage of those mental health disorders. So you can see what percentage of the population needs access to psychedelic mental health. But this is just at the very beginning of a sea change in an industry. So how many ketamine clinics in North America now exist, right? We talked about 189,000 dental offices to support the need. We talked about how about a quarter of Americans, adult Americans, have mental health issues, most of which can be addressed by ketamine. So how many ketamine clinics do we have to serve the need? Well, we don't have enough. We only have 600. However, that number 600 has been achieved only recently. It's been a rapid arrival at that number. It's still growing. See, there were far fewer than 600 only a short while ago. So we are rolling up as many of the existing 600 as we can under this national brand that's already famous called Irwin Naturals Emergence. Soon, we will turn our attention to the 13,000 general mental health clinics in the US and also in other countries, particularly Europe. There are 2 case studies that I think are fun that I would like to talk about with you. These are case studies of national expansions. So an expansion can occur via roll-up, or it can occur organically if it's done right. These are hero examples, right? There's lessons we can learn from these cases. So the first one, in the 1980s, VCRs were poised to explode in quantity, to soon become over 90% of US households having a VCR in their household. It was going to go from about 0 to about 90% in an extremely short period of time. Those types of major disruptions do not happen very often. So consumption of movies was on the verge of forever changing, right? The movie industry, the entertainment industry is a mega industry, right? And so this mega industry was on the verge of being forever changed as Americans and people across the planet were going to go through a brief few years of installing home theaters in their homes where the VCR was the central piece. The VCR allowed people to watch movies that were normally not going to show up on TV for 10 years, right? That they would be in the movie theater and then they wouldn't show up on TV, broadcast television. So now everything was going to change. So Wayne Nzinga, who participated in founding Blockbuster Video, so he was like one of these visionary guys. He was able to put his ear to the railroad tracks and hear the rumblings of a train that you couldn't quite see yet, that was 5 miles down the track. He could sense it. He knew that the sea change was going to be fast and disruptive, and it was going to change the entertainment industry. And he wanted to become the first mover in a land grab to build a brand, a household name brand, before anybody else in this emerging disruptive space. So what he needed is he needed a national footprint of video rental stores, but he needed it overnight. So they began rolling up mom and pop video stores at an unprecedented velocity compared to other roll-ups in history. And these stores got renamed Blockbuster Video, and then best practices were installed in each location. So an economy of scale was achieved, where each store could save money because there was a strength in numbers paradigm. But the number one economy of scale was not the excellent point of purchase computer systems they installed in these stores. And it really wasn't anything else other than the brand itself. The brand was the economy of scale. A national brand can be advertised at national ad rates, which can be up to an order of magnitude less expensive per gross impression than local advertising. And patient acquisition, or if you're a regular type of consumer product, customer acquisition is the most expensive and difficult challenge when seeking to grow a business arbitrarily fast. The second case study of a hero example is Jenny Craig. So years ago, she realized very early on that a disruptive sea change was about to occur in the industry of cardiovascular disease prevention. In other words, there was about to become an industry of cardiovascular disease prevention, when prior to that, there was not. What she saw is these clinics mostly in Los Angeles and places like New York at the time. They were charging high prices to teach people disease prevention, basically just how to eat right and exercise right. Okay? But she also recognized the mass market opportunity, where to be mass market, a service must be priced for the masses. And the masses include people of lower middle class income, lower income, upper middle class, but people who have a lot of debt and they can't afford, they can't afford a lot of things. And so she recognized that. So the only way to price for the masses, in her case, was to achieve economies of scale and a national brand that would allow for lower patient acquisition costs via the lower advertising rates that I just mentioned. So similar to Blockbuster Video and Jenny Craig, Irwin Naturals is doing a land grab. And by the way, Jenny Craig was successful. She got 700 clinics. She became a household name. She ended up saving countless millions of lives by the cardiovascular disease prevention service that they provided at very accessible pricing. So she executed her mission to do good and heal people, and her mission to become the Coca-Cola first mover in her space and have the dominant brand that led to lowering prices and helping more people. So Irwin Naturals, with our household brand, is doing a similar thing, a land grab in an emerging industry to be the dominant first mover and help disrupt. And we want to disrupt pricing in order to get access to people who most desperately need these treatments but can't afford them. So we will move fast to become the largest brand in this emerging psychedelic mental health renaissance in the clinic sector, which is one of the two brand sectors. So we have these brand sectors that we already discussed, where raw materials are gathered in, and then they're converted into drugs like Wellbutrin or ketamine. And the drugs can have brands, like ketamine has a brand called Spravato, right? That's a brand owned by Johnson & Johnson. And then where the other branded companies like Kaiser Permanente, or hopefully our chain of mental health clinics, will be the primary people at the end user level, where doctors talk to patients. So the difference, though, between what we're doing and what Wayne Azenga at Blockbuster and Jenny Craig had to do is when they started their expansions to be the Coca-Cola first mover, nobody had heard of their brands. So they were effectively non-existent brands. And so we're starting in a little bit of a different situation. We took 28 years to build up to a brand with 80% household name recognition. So you can call that a very helpful head start, because building a brand costs billions of dollars if you were to do it by the brute force of advertising alone. So our goal is to exploit or use the power of this national brand platform to, number one, help to more rapidly validate the psychedelic mental health treatment industry in the eyes of the regulators, in the eyes of the third-party insurance payers, and in the eyes of the public. And that is a validation that's already occurring on its own, thanks to this onslaught of high-level peer-reviewed clinical studies and the general excitement and support about this in the media. But once a big national brand comes into the space at a household name level, it's just one more evolution in the validation process. And then, of course, our second goal is that we want to drive down patient costs by using economy of scale, which lowers operating costs, which lowers patient costs, especially for low-income people. In other words, professionals for a life-saving treatment have no problem paying, a few $1,000s for a flight of 6 ketamine infusions. So it would be nice to be able to have, the upper middle class and the upper class people pay, a fair market type price, and then use some of that profit that we recover from our economies of scale to create a sliding scale for lower income people, so that we in the future don't have to turn down anybody because they don't have money. And we can even allocate a certain percentage of our budget to do completely free or pro bono work for very low income victims that are suffering. Anyway, we also intend to engage at an early stage with the major brand owners of future FDA-approved drugs in this space. Examples of those hero companies would be Compass and Cybin, and Atai and others. But these are the companies who are going to need to partner up with the other brand companies in the vertical integration stack. For example, in our general CPG division, right, where our biggest customers are Walmart and Costco, okay? But because Walmart and Costco are brands that dominate at the end user level, the interface with the people, right, who ultimately enjoy brands, we cannot afford not to deal with them. And in our psychedelic clinic division, we actually switch roles. It's the other way around. We become the brand at the end user level, and companies like, Cybin and Compass and others like Johnson & Johnson with their Spravato, they become the brands that are one level above us. We're at the end point where the patients exist, and they're one level above us. So we switch places, right, compared to our relationship with Walmart. But they need us just as much as we need them. And so we're going to be, what we intend to be at least, is the largest brand with the largest footprint globally of these clinics with this famous name. And so we will begin outreach later this year to start having high-level discussions of strategy with the major pharma companies in this space. Currently, we're using a stock in our Canadian public company to do the roll-up that I'm describing. So these are mostly stock swaps or stock-based transitions. We did announce recently a press release of our intent to file an S-1 registration with the SEC in the US.